This is The Big Breakdown, a long look back at some of the biggest stories we're covering for you at the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.
Let's move on to the Gilgo Beach murders. They've, of course, haunted Long Island now for several decades. 11 sets of remains found along Ocean Parkway. Community desperately searching for answers. Families waiting for justice. And now Rex Heuermann, the architect from Massapequa, stands accused of killing 7 women between 1993 and 2011. His push to split the charges into separate trials have been denied. That means one jury will hear all of it, from the earliest murder in 93 to the discovery of bodies along the highway in 2010. Jennifer Coffindaffer with us to help break down this investigation, the forensic, the psychological layers of all of this moving forward. What was your take on this, where the judge ruled that all 7 counts are going to be tried together? Prosecutors have argued that the murders were inextricably interwoven, and, well, I mean, the court agreed.
You know, it's such a balancing act between the prejudice that it can create in trying to show all this information from all 7, when many of the places, the dates, obviously the people were quite different. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, the defense is saying, you cannot do this to me. You can't do this to my client. This is so unfair. These were separate occasions, separate instances, and if you bring in the other 6, well, of course they're going to get a conviction, because they're going to say, oh my gosh, this is a serial killer. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the prosecution, as you well pointed out, is saying, no, they are so much alike. The MO is alike, the area was similar, the persons that were targeted were all people that provided sexual services. So really, it's all one. I got to tell you, though, I was pretty surprised. I mean, take a look at, a case you know so well is Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. Split up. They're too prejudicial, right? And that's one that, to me, should have been kept together.
Yeah.
You look at this and you say, all these years apart, it's a win for the prosecution.
It seems to be right now. I'll say that. But the more I look at that, yes, there are a lot of similarities, but we're talking 2 decades, all the way to 93 to 2010. We're talking different methods of killing. You do have some that are similar. You got the handful that have the burlap sacks with Heuermann's hair and stuff. And look, I think there's a good chunk of these that, yes, without a doubt, I think you can nail Heuermann on. But when you start introducing other ones that may not quite have the strong of evidence on them, and they are just other, and I'm not trying to denigrate the women by any means, but they're other sex workers who have been killed. And look, they find a lot of sex workers who have been killed in New Jersey, and in Long Island, in New York. I mean, just by mass population, you're going to find more bodies in different places because there's so many damn people. To lump them all together, could that be a misstep where it may not necessarily work in the favor of them, where the jury's not just going to go eventually and say, well, it's a serial killer because this and this and this? People don't trust law enforcement all that much these days, and rightfully so, especially in this area of the country where you had this case not being investigated for 10 years because of a corrupt officer, because of the corrupt chief for all of that time. So if they're being fed this, and we really think it's this, and then this kind of weak over here on some of these, I could see a jury going and saying, well, these don't really seem to add up that much. These ones kind of do, but how do we believe your solid ones over here when you're trying to give us the same bill of goods on these, and it's clearly not the same bill of goods?
Well, I do think, Tony, there's a lot that we still don't know, right?
Yeah.
This case was indicted, so we didn't have a preliminary hearing.
Yeah.
Haven't seen a vast amount of the evidence, I think, that is going to be shown. And so there can be other links that we just don't know about. But I agree that I think as a prosecutor, I would have asked for this, hoping that I got the moon, which they did. Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't have bothered me as a prosecution team to have the ones that were more contemporaneous in time and showed the exact MO to be lumped together, and the ones that weren't to be held separate. Do I think it's going to be a critical error? I don't know if on appeal down the road, if there's a conviction, but also keep in mind, Tony, gosh, this is one of those cases where the evidence is unbelievable.
Yeah.
The DNA, and the DNA, that ruling came earlier, that the DNA is coming in.
Yeah. And yes, and we can talk about that in a moment with the new DNA ruling. But that's my point. I mean, there is a slam dunk on some of these, but just there's an element to this case where it feels like, well, we got these unsolved ones. We better get those off of our docket. So let's just add them in. That's not the way to solve a crime. And it denigrates the value of the human lives that have been taken as well. Let me ask you this, and this is an opinion question. If these had not been sex workers over the course of almost 20 some years, if one had been an attorney, if one had been a teacher, if one had been a sex worker, the other had been whatever, insert any other type of job here that doesn't involve doing things that are illegal for money, do you think it would have been a trial that's going to combine all these people, or would it have been separate murder trials? Well,
let me say this. If they would have been lawyers, teachers, whatever, homemakers.
Sure.
This case would have been solved so much earlier. Mm-hmm. Rex Heuermann needs credit from this standpoint. He absolutely chose a trade that was so easy to murder and have swept under the rug, because nobody knew where they were at. Typically, nobody cared where they were at. Typically. And it was typical for them to not want to be known by anybody where they were at. So you add that all together, and that's probably the biggest problem with this case, is how historic it is. And so this was an important coup for the prosecutor, Tony, because as you said, and I know what you're getting at, you can't just say, oh, because, you have a sex worker that's dead. Oh, Rex Heuermann's over here. Let's throw him the bone.
I feel like that kind of almost it plays into my point, though, too, where it's like, Rex Heuermann knew that. So do other people. So do other criminals and other horrible people who would go and take the lives of people like this because they view them less as human. It's not any sort of secret that these sort of cases don't get the investigation that they deserve as human beings. So it's not shocking to think that other people were murdered by other human beings. I mean, how often is it that you have a serial killer that stabs, strangles, dismembers each victim differently and at different dump sites? I mean, typically you have some sort of a regular MO going on here. I know some are a bit different, but it is kind of an oddity that all these are different. Maybe he evolved over time. I don't know. But again, I feel like it's another argument that the defense has.
Oh, the defense has some good arguments here. I don't think they're going to hold water against the DNA and other evidence, but they have some good. And you just pointed out one. But remember, as I mentioned earlier, dismemberment typically occurs because of the practicality of it, of the goal of it, which is to hide or otherwise disguise what's been done. In other words, you chop it all up, you send it out to sea, and you hope nobody finds it. Or you throw a part here, a part there, and nobody can really make heads or tails figuring out what happened, right? That's the purpose. And then as killers get better, if you will, at their trade, they find better dump sites. I mean, look at how long this took for some of these bodies to even be found. And then the stage of decomposition that they were at, you're looking at, the Peaches tattoo, that's what you've got to work with. So, you do these people do get better at their trade, if you will, better at committing murder. And I think it's going to be stitched together, though, with DNA and with general MO.
Do you think that, if they have, because we know we have DNA in some of the bodies, and that's with the hair, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But do you think they're holding back other DNA evidence on these other bodies that they've linked to Heuermann, other than the fact that they were on the same beach or nearby other? I'm curious what's in the cards when this actually does go to trial that's going to connect some of these to Heuermann stronger than what we actually know.
I think there could be more DNA. I think that's very likely. Also, I haven't heard much about things that might have been at his house from them.
Mm-hmm.
We know the secret room or whatever.
True.
I mean, for instance, I'll give you an example. When the search warrant first happened, and they literally had one of those box trucks, large box trucks pull up to put all this evidence in. There was one thing that came out of that house that always bothered me, and it was a very large scale, looked like a 3-foot doll.
I know. I can picture it. It's creepy. Yes, it's like a horror movie.
Yeah. And as I said at the time, listen, there's a reason they took that doll.
Yeah.
No detective agent wants to take evidence out of a home that you're not going to use. You're sitting in your evidence vault. Once the case is closed, now you're trying to get rid of it. What am I going to do with this? I got to give it back, or I got to have it incinerated. There's all these legal issues you've got to go through. You take evidence because you believe it to be evidence. That made me wonder, is this doll somehow made in any way, shape, or form, whether it's the hair, clothing, go back to these people? That's
oh God.
Because why else do you take the doll? Or if it was used for sexual gratification, which also could have been, but how is it linked to your murder suspects? It's linked, I think.
Or, I mean, it can be more benign than he was making a murder doll out of victims. I mean, that's pretty freaking horrible. That sounds like that's like a movie. Look
at what he did, Tony.
There was a movie, wasn't there a movie like Bringing Out the Dead or something years ago? There was like that. It could be that.
He was
What's that? It silenced the eye. It's Clarice. But all the way to the FBI. It could be also. It could be somebody that they have maybe as a witness or something of that nature that had been in the Heuermann house that can attest that that doll was there.
Yeah.
I mean, just like connecting Heuermann. I don't know. I mean, there could be something simple as that of the setting of but why? I don't know. There could be ways. I like
also take the mantelpiece and
yeah, that's true. Why wouldn't? But that's a very distinctive piece, though, too. I mean, when they go in to get that evidence, when they went in to get the evidence, I should say, in this case specifically. They go in with a manifesto, don't they? Saying, okay, here's everything we're here to get. Or is it at a judgment call of the agents that are going in? Because I would imagine if I'm an agent going in and if I have carte blanche to take whatever the hell I want, I'm taking the doll because it's just creepy.
Okay, first of all, yes, when you have a warrant, no, there's no manifesto.
Okay.
Literally a list that lists all the things that could be indicia of the crime.
Okay.
So, for instance, if one of those is a piece of paper, you're really able to look anywhere where a piece of paper could be. So it's extremely broad, Tony. So certainly that doll would have been covered. And maybe you're right. Maybe they just took it because it is so creepy and they wondered. This is what I would be wondering does it have any part of anyone else on it?
Yeah.
That's exactly where my brain would go. Maybe I've just been doing this too long. I never thought that they took it because they wanted it to be matched up with a memory, but you could be right. Maybe it
could be very benign. I mean, it really could, or it could be something really, really disturbingly horrific that horror movies will be made out of for years to come.
The cage. Remember they took the cage?
They did.
Remember that. There's a cage that they took. And I'm like, did he cage him? And if he caged them, obviously they're going to be looking for any skin cells, hair, something. It would be years later, but stuff gets caught in the cracks. I don't know. Is he a good cleaner like Brian Koberger? I wish in that documentary they would have asked Asa and the daughter, where the hell was that doll located in the house? Like, was that in his little hidey hole cave thing under the stairs where maybe they didn't ever see it? Or was it like on display in the living room? That would tell you a little bit more about what this was, depending on where it was displayed. If it was like really hidden away, yeah, I think I'd be identifying the hair on that doll and wondering what the hell
is in that. Let's talk about the hair a little bit. The DNA, they're obviously now allowing some new technology to the genome sequencing on it. It'd be the first time, from what I understand, that it's going to be introduced in a New York court. Does not mean it's not good science. It's just new science. It's a new way. It's technology. We're always finding new ways of breaking down DNA and using it to identify things. It's how it works, and there's going to be a first time for everything. Of course, the defense is going to argue, it's junk science. This is new. It's never been used. How do you think that will play to a jury? Because they're certainly going to try and play it that direction from the defense. How does a jury take it when it comes to, new technology being used in something like this?
Well, in my experience, for instance, when cellular phones, we first got to start using cellular phones as evidence, that was huge. And I tell you, juries just are sitting there in awe. They find all this information that's technological. It's not somebody's opinion. It's not what a witness thinks they saw. It's what can be proven. And so when you look at DNA, I think they're going to be really fascinated. Obviously, it's going to be over a lot of people's heads. I mean, heck, it's over my head when they start, when Cece starts talking about all of it. But it's something that is going to be, I think, something the jury's going to be locked into, and it's going to make them really understand and put together his link, Rex Heuermann, to those people that I think is going to be irrefutable.
I do too. I mean, it's solid science, just a new way of doing it. And I think when you use terms like, genetic genome sequencing and stuff, I know nothing about what the hell that actually means. But if I were a juror, I'd be like, that sounds pretty official. That sounds like you know what you're doing over there. It may mean nothing at all, but it sounds pretty official. So, I mean, the verbiage is good. I guess they got a good title on it. But obviously it does mean a lot. The fact that you got Asa's hair on the burlap sacks, you got the daughter's hair on the burlap sacks. Obviously, Heuermann's the one that's charged, and they're no longer married. Asa seems to be, at least in that doc that we saw a little while back, still at that point in time, thinking Rex is her hero, really having a hard time, I think, coming to grips that your husband may be this person. The daughter, not so much. The daughter seems to be a little bit more coming to terms, if you will. At least that's what it felt like in that documentary. We recently saw in the Adelson trial, we had the one son that escaped the insane family testify against mom. Do you think we're going to see Rex's own daughter come to the stand here when this does go to trial to testify against her father?
Nothing surprises me anymore. I really do believe that there was a certain narrative that had to be followed because of that documentary, to be honest with you. I mean, remember, very early on, it did not seem that Asa was at all behind Rex Heuermann.
Yeah.
At the very beginning. She wanted a divorce. She seemed completely against him. And then, the money. Show me the money. Okay. To have the money, you're going to have to still be able to visit him. You're going to have to be able to get us some stuff, some information, and we need an interesting slant. And then, you have the documentary. So I call me callous. I don't necessarily believe that she was that blinded. I'm sorry. I don't.
I don't believe she was that blinded. I wonder where this is going to go when it comes to court. She, of course, can do her Fifth Amendment rights and not do say anything to incriminate herself. And she may not have anything to incriminate herself on. Who knows? Obviously, she's never been charged with anything. She maintains her innocence. It would be interesting, though, if we end up seeing a trial here where you have the daughter testifying against dad and you have Asa taking the stand for Rex, especially if she still maintains this level of cognitive ignorance, I would say, almost on Rex of believing he's innocent. I could see her being a witness for him. And I wonder how that could play to a jury with her literally, if she does acts the way she did in that doc, the jury, I think, could see her really, if she's up there saying, I had no idea any of this was going on, the jury's going to wonder, how the hell do you have no idea anything was going on? And if you have no idea anything was going on, then how sure are we that this is him?
Yeah, when you look at this case as an example, another case, Kerry Rawson, Dennis Rader, BTK, that's different. because Dennis Rader was not murdering women, bringing them home, doing these things in a secret room in your house. And we've all seen the pictures. This was not a Diddy mansion by any means. And to think that you wouldn't smell, you wouldn't notice, you wouldn't just say, honey, what you got going on? I think you're here. Are you here? Is that you under the stairs? It's so almost ridiculous.
Are you playing with your doll again under the stairs, Rex?
What's happening, Rex? Come on.
Dinner. I made spaghetti. Come on up.
No, it's just, it looks so bad because of everything that was going on in that house. That's the difference between the Bundys of the world and the other serial killers, the BTKs. They're doing things out from underneath the nose of their families. Yes, they're sneaking out, but at least they're not doing it underneath the stairwell.
That's true.
And I understand she was supposedly, like, the trips are lining up, that mostly she was gone. But, there's other information that, maybe she...
I want to know how you're lining up every trip for 20 years to be is supposedly... It seems like... I don't even know how you get dates on all that going back to 93,
Well, you saw the pack rat situation.
True. Yeah.
I don't know if they ever even threw away like a shoebox receipt. I mean, it's ridiculous. But having said that, her story is hard for someone like me to believe. Mm-hmm. Maybe everybody else is believing it. Having trouble with it. And she's probably in trouble with it.
I have trouble with it too. I have trouble with it. I have a ton of mixed feelings about Asa, but we'll see how this all plays out as time goes on. Let me ask you this. This just came to my mind too. Could this be a domino situation?
I don't think so. You mean with Asa getting charged in some way
after Rex?
I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, you know what it would take for that to happen? It would take Rex Heuermann flipping on Asa, that she was a part of all of this. She's going to have some sort of limited immunity, I believe, and very limited, that she has to have been telling the truth. So if Rex would somehow flip on Asa, then I think you could see some very interesting movement within the prosecution, but I wouldn't anticipate that.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what comes out once this actually does get to trial. You're always great at predicting this stuff. Clearly, it's not happening this year. Are you thinking next year? Are you thinking 97? I know I said 97, but I'm thinking 27 or 28.
I'm going to 27.
27. I would go with you on that one. I think, and I'm wondering if we're going to have more bodies added to the list before then, too.
Well, if more bodies are added, then we're going to add more years. But at this point, 27, more bodies, they're going to still be working on it. I mean, who else is out there that could possibly be connected? These guys don't stop. They don't just, I think I'm not going to have a lust and an appetite for this.
I would say the clock is ticking on Rex. So I would say sooner than later to get going on this, because I wonder how many years Rex has left in him, quite honestly. So it's a gamble, but it would be a damn shame if they spend all these years getting all this ready to go and he died in prison today. And yeah.
Tony, I got to tell you though, isn't it interesting? We've seen the Luigi Mangione lovers, his groupies. They've gone over to Kohberger. Kohbergers have gone over to the Luigis. Why are they leaving Rex out?
I don't know. I wonder why they don't like Rex. Not as relatable of a character? I don't know. We'll let the maggots go wherever they're going to go, I guess. Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent. As always, thank you for coming on and giving us your insight onto these cases. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube, and be sure to press subscribe wherever you're downloading podcasts so you don't miss any of the cases that we cover for you right here. Let's move over to the Gilgo Beach murders. One of the cases that never was leaving the public's imagination, and also sets 11 sets rather of remains found along Ocean Parkway. Families waiting years for answers, and a suspect who seemed to live in plain sight. Rex Heuermann, Long Island architect, now stands accused of killing 7 women between 1993 and 2011. This week, the judge ruled that all 7 charges will be tied together, a decision that could shape the entire outcome of the case. Eric Faddis, obviously, you are here to help us break this down. That ruling that they made this week, for more than a year, the defense fought to sever that sprawling case into several different cases, arguing each murder was too different to be lumped together. But the judge, Timothy Mazie, ruled that the murders are inextricably interwoven, and prosecutors will get to present them as one long pattern instead of 7 small battles. There's now one giant war. It's more than a technicality. It changes how jurors will experience the case. They won't see a collection of isolated deaths. They'll hear the state's theory of a single predator operating across decades and a pattern of behavior. What is this ruling? How does this reshape the entire trial before a jury is even seated, before we even have a court date, really?
I think it's a huge ruling, and I think it's going to be really problematic for the defense because, when a jury hears about one alleged murder, they're already getting shivers. I mean, it's already an uncomfortable situation to be in, and you start looking sideways at the accused. Did he do it? Could he have done this? But when you hear about multiple alleged murders with a lot of similarities between them, you look at the type of alleged victim. They were all sex workers. You look at the locale. Most of them were located within a specific locale, their bodies. There are overlap in terms of the evidence among the murders, including vehicles used and including DNA evidence as well. And so, as defense, it's hard to say, hey, my guy didn't do any of these multiple murders. It's just a huge conspiracy. Well, why, person being charged with like 11 murders or so automatically has a huge disadvantage on the defense side, way harder than defending a single murder.
Because at the end of the day, in this case, it's not an all or nothing verdict that's going to come in. They're going to look at all of these charges, are they not, for each individual crime? The jury, correct me if I'm wrong, they could in theory come back and say, well, we think you're guilty of this one, and this one, but not that one, this one, and the one over here.
Oh, they absolutely could. And that'll be the jury's responsibility. They will have to determine each individual charge. And I bet defense is going to request a limiting instruction, which is where the judge says to the jury, hey, if you find evidence of murder one, that the number one count, that doesn't mean you can use that evidence in and of itself to convict him of the second count of murder. However, jurors are human beings, and I think they're going to look at this in a more holistic fashion, which is a problem for the defense, but could give the defense some kind of out on appeal should there be a conviction.
Jurors are human beings, and so are the victims here, obviously, in this. Unfortunately, our society doesn't feel that way half the time about sex workers. And clearly, whoever killed these people did not look at them as human beings as well. Is this... I totally understand the argument of this could easily get a conviction and weigh it stronger for the prosecution, but does it denigrate or lessen the value of the lives of these victims by lumping them all into one big pile of sex workers?
It's an important question because you got to look at this from the perspective of the victims' families. If you have one trial where they're trying to convict somebody of killing your loved one, that's sort of center stage. Your loved one's memory is going to be center stage as well. But when you have multiple alleged victims, there's a concern that things can kind of get lost in this murky murder soup, which is a horrible thing to think about. But, and also, does the prosecution spend more time on perhaps the stronger charges and perhaps kind of call in the less stronger charges? You have that concern when there is a trial that involves so many alleged acts over the course of the better part of 2 decades.
And I want to stress this because the similarities in these victims' deaths were not all identical. And that's where I was a little, I don't want to say surprised, but I just didn't know where it was going to go with the judge's decision this week. The defense argued that the cases had nothing in common. The first victim from 1993, stabbed, others strangled, some dismembered, some wrapped in burlap. And obviously we know the burlap ones had hairs of the Heuermann family on them, pretty much all of them. And the timeline stretched almost 20 years. I mean, their position was that there was no true signature, and putting them together would unfairly prejudice a jury. They even floated 5 separate trials to keep things more isolated. Obviously, they lost that motion. Again, I do think, in my opinion, I think Rex has a lot to do with this, but again, I'm looking at this going, are they jumping the gun on trying to connect all this stuff, and will it backfire in the end? Because I feel like the defense, in some ways, this gave the defense some pretty strong arguments of the differences in all of these cases. And they better have pretty strong evidence on each and every single one of these murders that ties it to Rex, not just some collective, well, it looks like kind of could have. I mean, the hairs on the burlap ones are certain, but I don't know about the others. Are they tying some of these in here to stronger pieces because it will make that case stronger rather than being tried on its own?
100%. I think that's absolutely the approach the prosecution is taking. And you're right, it gives rise to this concern that when the jury's looking at this case back in the deliberation room and they're saying, hey, I think there's enough evidence beyond a reasonable doubt of the first murder and the second murder. Well, I'm not so sure, but let's err on the side of caution and convict him of that anyway. Well, that presents a tremendous fairness issue. It presents a tremendous due process issue and significant appellate issues as well. So you got to be careful of overplaying your hand. Yes, Stacey.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But isn't there a bit of public pressure that they want him to be guilty of all of these? So if he's guilty of one, we kind of need to blanket it, because if we don't, there's another serial killer out there who could still be loose. Isn't this more for public pressure?
It's a critical point, and it's something, if I was defense counsel, I'd be arguing during closing, saying that, hey, look, the government has all of these dead bodies, and they can't solve those cases. Right. But here we have this scapegoat, and we think they think they can tie him to a handful of misdeeds, and so let's add on all of our unsolved stuff to make us look like heroes and say, hey, we got the guy, we got him, and we solved all these murders from decades ago, when really they better come with the evidence if they're going to take that approach, because simply insinuation does give rise to the specter that they're just trying to get some homicide cases off their desk and sort of look like the hero.
That's what it feels like, honestly. And in no way am I trying to downplay Rex Heuermann. I think he's certainly tied to some of these without a doubt. And if you were just to look at some of the others and go, yeah, I mean, that's a probability. But then you also take into account the sheer population in that area of the country, New York, Long Island, all that. You have more people condensed in one little spot than most any other place in the United States. You have a lot of people, a lot of death, a lot of murder around there just because of having that many people there. And it's not uncommon that there are deaths and murders on that seedy side of the world. People don't like BS. People don't like being lied to. People don't like cops trying to spin a story to fit their narrative, which we've already seen in this, or I guess lack of action in this case for quite some time, why it took forever to actually get to a conviction in this case, or a charge in this case. I'm looking at this and I'm feeling like they're going about this the wrong way. I feel like you could very easily get a jury, because you could just as easily get a jury in this that's going to go, we think you're stretching the limits over here quite a bit, so why should we believe anything you're saying over here?
Oh, totally. So the prosecution's credibility is super important with this jury. If they overextend, if they overplay their hand, like you said, it could call into question how a jury sees the reliability of the rest of their evidence. And if I'm defense counsel, perhaps I'm arguing something like, this case is about overkill, but it's not my client's overkill. It's the government who is trying to pin on the scapegoat all of these additional charges that they couldn't solve otherwise. And if you can't, place any faith in those accusations, how much faith can you really place in what the government sees as some more solid accusations?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Look, he's guilty. In my opinion, he's guilty of several of these. Is he guilty of all of them? We don't know. But there are several other cases that they have not tied to him yet that are just sitting out there kind of in speculation. Will they add this? Won't they add this? And may end up being tied to this at the end of the day. But it seems like a very tightrope that they have to be walking on right now, especially as this leads up to trial too. We still don't have a trial date. We don't even know when this trial will take place. In your opinion, what would you think? Next year at some point? Or, could this play out for several more years with the possibility of them throwing more victims onto this?
I'm hopeful that we'll reach some kind of finality in 2026. That being said, one single murder case can be pushed out for months, if not years. We're talking multiple murder cases all combined into one. And on top of that, if they add charges, if they add alleged victims, that can start the whole thing over again because the defense has to investigate a brand new murder case. And so we might not see any resolution for these victims' families and for Rex until 2027 or possibly beyond.
So what is the definition of a speedy trial then? Because not that I'm defending Rex Heuermann, but how long can somebody remain behind bars without their trial taking place?
It's a very important question. It comes up a lot, Stacey. So typically there is what's called a statutory right to speedy trial, which is in the state's law. And then there's a constitutional right to speedy trial. Statutory right to speedy trial is usually something like 6 months, but there are exceptions. And sometimes the defense agrees to waive it. In fact, commonly the defense would agree to waive their statutory right to speedy trial to do additional investigation, get prepared for trial. The constitutional one is much more vague and unclear. It's kind of like within a reasonable amount of time, and you look at other cases and say, hey, it's been longer than this case, but less long than this case. Does that result in a constitutional violation? So certainly that could come into play as we approach 2026. And if it goes longer than that, certainly we're having concerns about speedy trial at that point. But there's usually not a great black and white rule for that, except on the statutory side, which has a ton of exceptions.
Gotcha. Thank you.
On the tightrope that they're walking here, the forensics are on the front line here. The DNA, that sequencing and the process that they're using is unlike anything most jurors have seen. Investigators used whole genome sequencing. Of course, we all know what that is, right? It's a first in New York murder trials. It is a reliable science. It's just a new science. And when anything is new, people are going to have questions. To match degraded hairs from multiple victims to Heuermann. They also say they found female hairs belonging to his wife on some of the victims, even though she was out of town at the time of the murder, suggesting transfer from basically the Heuermann household and Heuermann, Rex, from the house to Rex to the bodies to the burlap sacks. The defense calls it magic science, and obviously it's not magic science. It's creative use of words. They're trying to make it sound like this is junk science.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.